You wish to help? Suma chirped, slightly confused. If I can, yeah, I told her. Even after I tried to control you? Just don't do it again, I chuckled. Of course, never again, she said, and began almost bobbing up and down, singing happily. Asumu dajan nisa. I think the translation thing stopped working for a second, I said. Suma slowly stopped bouncing and still exited, explained. Oh no, it is still working fine. I was singing in the old tongue of my people. I do not truly know what it means, but in my country it is sung when we are happy. Oh, I nodded in understanding. So, Suma, can you tell me what I should expect if I were to become your familiar? Suma's head craned back as if she were avoiding a slap. Jake, I could not possibly make you my familiar. I am not worthy to be the master of such a powerful being as you. You have already shown so much kindness by naming me. I could not possibly ask any more of you. I shook my head and waved a hand in dismissal. You aren't asking, I am. I prepared for years in case I was summoned again. Then I find out that there's no danger anymore, and I basically wasted years of my life over nothing. I want to at least use the skills I learned to help someone. I'm not much of a soldier, but maybe I could make a decent familiar. Suma was dumbstruck and could barely form a sentence. She shook her head and flapped her wings. Okay. So, what do we do first? I asked. We need to perform the rite of two. It will bind our souls and allow us to communicate with each other across worlds, as well as let me summon you in a moment's notice, she explained. How do we do that? I wondered. We need to go to the Grand Sanctum. It is illegal to try and perform it anywhere else now, after what happened. I figured she was either talking about me or that Borog beast, but I didn't ask. With that, we left the school and made our way to the city. Will it be all right if I just walk around like this? What if I scare someone? I asked Suma. It should be fine. Most people will just assume you are a familiar and under a control ritual, but you will definitely draw quite a few stares. She chirped in a way that I think she was laughing. She wasn't wrong, nobody bothered us, but almost everyone we passed looked at me with either shock or fear. I was guessing anyway. I still can't exactly tell with them. For all I knew, they could have been flipping me off in their own way. We arrived at the Grand Sanctum without incident, mostly. I think one nymph was trying to seduce Suma, but she had me chase him off. She chirped happily as he squawked and flew away as fast as he could. The Grand Sanctum was a large white building that had huge holes peppered throughout its walls. Nymphs were speedily flying in and out of them, making a variety of noises as they did. There was a large open area at the bottom, well, large compared to the nymphs. I had to crouch down to make it through. I guess bipedal apes are rare for familiars. Inside it was like a giant bird cage. Some areas had walls, others just wire shells, but most of it was empty space, so that there was room to fly. This place is huge, I whispered to Suma. She had told me that I needed to be quiet, or the other nymphs would think she was losing control of me and I would end up in a cage or something. It is actually the largest building in the city right now, but I understand there is a bigger one somewhere in the western atolls. Suma quietly told me. We waited in a line leading to a large pedestal for about 20 minutes, but eventually we were called up by an older-looking nymph with grayish feathers and a more curled beak than Suma's. Next! He squawked. We walked up and Suma said, I am here to perform the rite of two. ID number and date of hatching, the older bird requested. ID 126556971. I was hatched on the 2nd of Fammoth 12 years ago. Oh, and my name is Suma. That last part she announced proudly. As soon as Suma said she had a name, the older bird perked up and began talking in a much friendlier tone. Oh, Madam Suma, my apologies for the long wait. We will get you a room for your ritual right away. The older bird looked at me, then back to Suma. Is this the creature you will be pairing with today? Or shall I get you a summoning squad? This is him, she answered. Very good. We will alert you in just a moment when a room is available. Please feel free to relax in our waiting area, and if you want, we have a nice kennel for your future familiar to stay in while you wait. I shot him an icy glare and the feathers around his neck puffed up. That will not be necessary. Jake will be staying with me. Very good, he said, looking back and forth between me and Suma. We walked into the waiting area he mentioned. and she perched on a kind of metal branch thing. Meanwhile, there wasn't a single real seat in sight. I sighed. I guess I'll stand. Sorry about the kennel remark, Suma said sheepishly. It's no big deal, I told her. I guess that's something I'll just have to get used to. We didn't have to wait long for our turn in the room. I guess named nymphs are this world equivalent of rich people or nobility of some kind. The room was much smaller than the main area, but more than large enough for me and several nymphs. Okay, Jake, are you ready? Suma asked. Ready, I told her. Suma then bowed her head and spread her wings with the tips pointing to the sky. A glowing, multicolored magic circle formed on the golden floor around each of our feet and began to twist and match the shapes of our shadows. Soon, I felt a kind of heaviness in my soul and nearly fell to my knees, but managed to steady myself and stay standing. The weight suddenly vanished, and I heard a voice echoing inside of my mind. It was far away at first, and I could make out the words, but soon it boomed like thunder. A name is required. A name, I asked aloud. Suma looked at me questioningly. Did you hear that, Jake? She sounded confused or maybe scared. Without warning, a small ember began to glow on the floor. It radiated in a brilliant display of light until it nearly exploded into a roaring inferno between Suma and myself. A name is required! The flaming figure bellowed. There were several large birds and their animals in the room with us, and each of them stepped back at the sight of this creature. I am Jake! I yelled out, but the figure ignored me and turned to Suma. She looked at me, then turned back to the figure and shouted, His name is Sentinel! The figure faded back to an ember, and a burning pain shot through my shoulder. Ah! I yelped, and lifted up my sleeve to see that a magic circle, surrounded by some kind of alien letters, had been etched into my skin like a tattoo. I looked down at the floor, and the magic circles faded away into nothing, leaving the room filled with an eerie quiet. What the heck was that? I asked, breaking the rest of the room's occupants out of their own stupors. I have no idea, Suma replied meekly. Chapter 4. Preparations. I laid in my bed that night, unable to sleep. The image of that flaming figure was burned into my mind and would not let me rest. I had asked Suma about it, and she asked some of the other officials from the temple, but no one had any answers. I thought back to our conversation after we left the temple. We were both shaken and concerned. How'd you know what it meant when it asked for a name? I asked Suma. Fluttering beside me, she landed on the shoulder that now bore a strange tattoo. I just had a feeling. I do not know how to explain it. All I know is that the pairing worked. I can now summon you whenever I need, and we can talk to each other between worlds, Suma said. How do you know? Is it the tattoo thing? I asked, pointing my free hand at the markings. Yes, she nodded her head. Can I ask you something? Why did you choose the name Sentinel? Or better yet, where did you even hear that word? Sentinel, it means great one. I thought it fit. My world has that word too, you know. It basically means guardian or watcher. Then I was right. It does fit. It had been hours since Suma sent me back to my world, plopping me right back in the middle of my kitchen. I checked my watch as soon as I arrived, then checked the alarm clock in my room. There was a massive difference between the two. I had been gone for 2 or so hours, but according to the clock in my room, no time had passed. Thoughts kept racing through my mind. How am I supposed to beat something like a Borog if I'm not armed? What if I'm summoned to fight in a war and I get someone killed because I'm not strong enough? I stayed awake all night trying to answer these questions and more, but the only conclusion I came to was this. I can't ever be caught with my pants down. I began researching how to fight various kinds of animals, and the best ways to treat wounds in as many circumstances as I could think of. I made a list of supplies for everything from first aid to close quarters combat that was legal to own in my country. Shy of moving to America, where I could probably buy an AK-47 at Walmart, I needed a surefire way to deal with as many situations as possible. My eventual conclusion was that I needed something that I could quickly convert into a weapon after I was summoned, or learn how to manufacture the weapon in the other world so that I could keep it there. The conversion seemed easier, so I pulled a 3D modeling program to help me design it. The sunlight poured into my room from outside just as I put the finishing touches on my design. In the course of 4 hours, I had gone through 7 ideas and attempted to build mock versions of them out of what I had laying around. I decided on what was essentially a kind of folding knife that could attach to a collapsible rod. I looked at my clock and decided that I could finish my project later since it was my day off work. Just as I laid down to sleep, I heard Suma's voice in my head. "I summon you, Sentinel." A magic circle formed on my bed around my body, and I slowly began to disappear. I reached out and grabbed a pajama shirt and trousers just before my hand disappeared. Chapter 5. The Right Tools. "Ah!" I yelped as I slammed face first onto the grassy ground. Suma squawked in surprise and flapped her wings in an attempt to regain her balance. "Jake, are you okay?" she asked, once again finding her footing on a small wooden perch. I groaned, rolling over on my back and touching my face to make sure I wasn't bleeding. "A little warning would have been appreciated," I said, sitting up and pulling my trousers up, then sliding on my shirt. "Sorry, but what were you doing floating in the air without your garments?" Suma wondered. I stood up and rolled my shoulders. I was about to go to sleep. "Okay, but how were you floating?" she asked. "I wasn't floating, I was laying on a bed. Boy, I sure am glad I had clothes nearby," I told her. "Oh, if you were laying on something, I suppose that makes sense. But why were you not in your garments?" She cocked her head in confusion. "Suma, why did you summon me here?" I ignored the question because at that moment I didn't feel like detailing the intricacies of human sleeping habits. "Oh, right, we need to train," she explained excitedly. "Train, but wait, I feel fine," I exclaimed. I was expecting to feel absolutely exhausted after staying up all night and day, but actually I felt as if I had just gotten a full night's sleep. "Suma, why am I not tired?" Summoning a person basically reconstitutes them in our world fully rejuvenated and healed. It was made this way so as to heal wounds dealt during battle, she told me, although it cannot revive the dead or replace lost limbs. "So, I could get stabbed, but as soon as you send me back home, I'll be fine?" I asked. "So long as you do not die, then yes," she said. "Are you ready to train?" Suma asked. "Sure, but what do you mean when you say train?" I wondered. "Practice our magics and battle strategies, as well as find out what our combination magic is and how it works," Suma told me. I don't know any magic," I said. Her head moved back slightly and she ruffled her feathers. "But you used magic to kill the Borog." "No, I used a gun." "What is a gun?" "It's a weapon made to send a small piece of metal several hundred kilometers per hour at an opponent. This usually puts a hole in them, some large and some small depending on the type," I explained. "Okay, well, you can just use that in training," Suma said. "I don't have it. I don't even own one. I was just renting the one I had when I killed the Borog." Suma stayed quiet for a moment. Her beaked face gave little in the way of expression, but I could only assume it was either regret or annoyance at the sudden realization that I didn't come with the super awesome instant kill move she thought I had. "Well, how do we make one?" she finally asked. "Your world has magic, right? I spent a lot of time thinking about that last night, and I came up with 2 ideas. My first thought was to make a weapon that I could keep on my person at all times in my world, but that's infeasible and would most likely end with me in jail. My second thought was constructing a weapon here and leaving it with you when I'm not here." "Okay, I think we could do that. But what kind of weapon did you have in mind?" "We have quite a few weapons here, but nothing like your gun," Suma said. "I was thinking a sword and shield, or maybe a spear. If I could figure out how to make it practical, I would try and make a gun of some kind. Even a flintlock would work, but the materials required might not even exist here. So I won't worry about that yet," I told her. "What are swords and spears?" she asked. I was a bit caught off guard by the question, but I guess it made sense that their species didn't have things like that since they don't have hands or the bodies necessary for that kind of combat. "A sword is a sharp piece of metal like iron or steel fixed to a handle, and a spear is similar but far longer," I told Suma. Suma shook her head. "I cannot say I have ever heard of such things." "Does your world have the ability to melt steel and shape it?" I asked. "We do, but it is usually only done for things like construction. I do not know if weapons can be made that way." "Might as well try," I said. With that, Suma and I went into the city in search for a metalworker and tools. I knew enough about the process from my studies and the years of preparation that I could probably do it myself if I have to, but I'd rather leave it in the hands of professionals. It took only an hour, but soon we found a small shop run by an elderly unnamed nymph who seemed interested in making weapons out of steel instead of just normal construction supplies. I gave him a detailed drawing of a sword, shield, and a spear. I don't know how he planned to build our order without hands, but he seemed confident that he could. We paid him with some of this world's currency as well as a bit of magic power, which Suma supplied. I asked later, and she explained that was a normal way to pay here. In total, it cost us only a little bit of money, at least I think, as the metalworker seemed like he cared more about finding out if it was possible than getting paid. How long did that nymph say our weapons would take to finish? I asked Suma. A week total, but the spear probably only 2 days. If you love engaging stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all the latest episodes from FY Stories.